I'm Teisha with Shalom TV's news update for Wednesday, August the 28th, 2013. As Israelis hit their local post offices in an effort to obtain gas masks, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is urging the public to remain calm in the midst of the Syrian crisis. The Prime Minister said in a statement today after holding a security assessment on the Syrian situation at IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv, "There is no reason to change our routine. We are preparing for every eventuality." The Prime Minister further said the IDF is ready to defend against any threat and to respond with force to any attempt to harm Israel's citizens. The IDF spokesperson's unit also called on the public to remain calm and said, quote, "Despite the possible American strike in Syria," insisted, "there is no reason to change our routine." IDF spokesman Brigadier General Yoav Mordechai posted on his Facebook page, "As can be expected, the IDF is learning, following, and examining the events in Syria hour by hour. The Home Front Command knows its job and is working to prepare for any scenario, hence there's no reason for people to change their routine." The IDF said any change in the Army's instructions will be posted as necessary and brought to the attention of every citizen using the broadest possible distribution methods. The IDF did also deploy an additional Iron Dome battery in the country's north and was said to be readying the Arrow short-range rocket defense system for use on the northern front as well. Syria has warned that any military intervention on the part of the U.S. in Syria would make Israel a target, although Israeli officials assess that the probability that Syrian President Assad would actually respond to a U.S. attack by firing missiles on Israel was low. Israel's Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon echoed Israel's preparedness. He told an economic conference in Tel Aviv today, "We are planning and preparing, but not panicking." Ya'alon said Israel's borders are calm and stable, and Israel's responses clarify its own red lines and are based on deterrence. Ya'alon further said the Syrians crossed a red line set by the Americans, the use of chemical weapons. "These are horrific scenes, but the matter is being dealt with by the West and the U.S., not us," he said. "We are prepared, but there's no panic or escalation." Ya'alon further said, "Our finger is not light on the trigger, but anyone who assumes he can threaten us will be met by our force." Meanwhile, Israel's Security Cabinet has authorized the IDF to call up a limited number of reserve soldiers due to the Syrian crisis. Ynet cites a senior IDF official saying, "We've been given a mandate to recruit thousands of reservists, but we will recruit only up to 1,000 to vital arrays in the Air Force, Home Front Command, and IDF intelligence." And Ynet also reports that Syrian Prime Minister Wael al-Khalki addressed the possibility of a strike in Syria and said his country would be like a graveyard for any invaders. He said, "Like we surprised them on Yom Kippur, we will now surprise them with our victory." Al-Khalki also said that Western states led by Israel and the U.S. are fabricating stories of chemical weapon use in order to take military action against Syria. The U.S. State Department denied Palestinian claims earlier this week that a scheduled meeting between Israeli and Palestinian peace negotiators was canceled over clashes in a refugee camp that left 3 Palestinians dead. As we reported to you, the 3 were killed when some 1,500 Palestinians attacked IDF forces that had arrived in the Kalandia refugee camp to arrest a suspected terrorist. State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf told a press briefing Monday that the meeting between the negotiating teams had not been canceled over the deaths, as several Palestinian officials had said. She said, "I can assure you that no meetings have been canceled," adding, "The parties are engaged in serious and sustained negotiations." And the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has dismissed a complaint against the University of California, Berkeley, that had claimed that campus protests critical of Israel's policies had created a hostile environment for Jewish students, and that the university had a legal obligation to curb the demonstrations. The complaint filed last year by 2 recent graduates alleged that campus officials had allowed a hostile campus environment for Jewish students to continue unabated by not stopping the protests critical of Israeli policies, referring specifically to the annual February Apartheid Week. The complaint charged that the demonstration violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says that recipients of federal funds are barred from discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And in 2010, the U.S. Department of Education had extended Title VI to include the protection of Jewish students from anti-Semitism on campuses. But after an investigation, the Office for Civil Rights concluded that the demonstrations, quote, constituted expression on matters of public concern directed to the university community, and that even when personally offensive and hurtful, is a circumstance that a reasonable student in higher education may experience in this context. UC Berkeley Chancellor Nicholas Dirks said he was pleased with the outcome of the investigation. He said the claim that there is a hostile environment for Jewish students at Berkeley is on its face entirely unfounded. The campus takes great pride, he said, in its vibrant Jewish community and in the many academic and cultural opportunities available to members of that community and others interested in its history and culture. He said we will continue our ongoing efforts to protect free speech rights while promoting respectful dialogue and maintaining a campus environment that is safe for all of our students. The final flight of Ethiopian Jews to Israel landed at Ben Gurion Airport today. 400 Falashmora arrived in Israel late this afternoon, ending nearly 30 years of Aliyah from the country. The group was brought to Israel by the Jewish Agency as part of Operation Wings of a Dove, which was launched in November of 2010 when the Israeli government decided to check the Aliyah eligibility of an additional 8,000 Ethiopians. Ethiopian Israelis gathered outside the Prime Minister's office today to protest the end of Aliyah from Ethiopia, holding pictures of their loved ones who remain there. Some 12,000 members of the Falashmora community in Ethiopia, centered in and around the city of Gondar in the north of the country, have reportedly not been granted permission by the Interior Ministry to make Aliyah to Israel. Since 2010, the Jewish Agency has brought approximately 7,000 immigrants from Ethiopia to Israel. Jewish and Muslim communities in Poland are joining forces to fight Poland's ban on ritual slaughter. The directors of the Jewish Community Center of Krakow and the Krakow Islamic Center, Jonathan Ornstein and Dr. Chaisam Obeidat, respectively, issued a joint open letter yesterday saying their communities stand united and call on the Polish government and the Supreme Court, if necessary, to ensure the right to practice their traditions. The letter read, "A free, democratic Poland must safeguard the rights of all its citizens, whichever race, faith, or group they belong to. Our two communities, Muslim and Jewish, although small in number, deserve the same rights as the majority of Poles who are Catholic." The letter further pointed out that the idea that ritual slaughter is cruel to animals is completely false, saying both Jewish and Muslim practices demanding humane treatment of animals goes back to the founding of both faiths. It also called attention to the double standard of the current situation in Poland, which allows the hunting of animals for sport, but ritual slaughter remains forbidden. And finally, today, the Jewish Week reports that 2 new Hebrew charter schools opened this week here in the U.S., Harlem Hebrew Language Academy Charter School in New York City and Sela in Washington, D.C. Collectively, the two schools enrolled approximately 300 students in kindergarten and first grade. Hebrew charter schools are publicly funded, tuition-free schools that teach Hebrew language and some secular aspects of Israeli and Jewish culture. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Wednesday, August the 28th, 2013. I'm Teisha Bader.